Good afternoon, everybody. It's going to be, I think, a little packed, so don't be shy about getting more closer to each other during the course of the Salon. I am glad to see you all here. My name is Paola Antonelli, and I'm the Director of R&D here at MoMA. R&D is a lot of R, very little D, I like to say, but the R that we do is very interesting in trying to link the ways of the museum with the ways of the real world. And we do so in many different ways, but one of the ways is to have these salons in which we invite experts to talk about topics that have a relevancy to the outside world as much as they have relevancy to the inside world of the museum. And then we invite experts in the audience, because you could be here on stage as well as these people on stage could be in the audience, in order to have an exchange that is really meaningful. And we've had salons about many different topics, ranging from taboos to philanthropy and big data or bigger data. And today we would like to talk about the algorithm. The algorithm that is this kind of myth that is invoked very often for good and for bad in general culture, sometimes misinvoked and sometimes used as a way to abdicate responsibility for choices by, in some cases, companies, in other cases, other outfits. But it's really something that is central to our life, and in a way it has been central to humanity for millennia. As many other topics that we touched upon, it seems like it's really timely and of today, but in truth it's been something timely for millennia. What is an algorithm? You see here a set of instructions that are printed in an old-fashioned printer. I don't know if you watched the television series *Halt and Catch Fire*. I was lucky as to not have seen it when it first came out, and so I had the treat the past weekend. I did a binge watch, and it was from 1983, this company, this fictionary company in Dallas that was supposed to come out with a portable laptop before IBM and before everybody else. And they had these great printers from once upon a time, real nostalgia. But you see here, it's a printout of algorithms, and it's one of the items that went for auction at the algorithm auction that happened a few weeks ago here in Manhattan. So an algorithm, obviously, is something that can be had, that exists, that has a personality, but it's also a set of instruction. And just for a little bit of history, here are two personalities of the many, but maybe the two most important personalities in the history of algorithm. The first is a scientist, a Persian scientist, Al-Khwarizmi. Oh my God, I tried so many times to say it right before. Al-Khwarizmi, yeah. From whose name the name algorithm and also algebra comes. And he wrote on Hindu Arabic numerals and was among the first to use 0 as a placeholder in positional-based notation. And Alan Turing, of course. Alan Turing, that's been finally celebrated for the hero and the amazing genius that he was, who was a British pioneer and computer scientist responsible for breaking codes during the Second World War, but also the inventor of the Turing machine, which provided a formalization of the concept of algorithm and computation. It was a hypothetical device that manipulated symbols on a strip according to a table of rules. So in a way, it was the conceptualization of what computers do. And it was from 1936. You see it there. So these two personalities, in a way, introduced us to the way algorithm is intended today. Many people think about algorithm as a mathematical set of instructions, and definitely it is. But any kind of recipe can be considered an algorithm. This is what Christian Sandvig, who's a professor in the School of Information at the University of Michigan, says. A good synonym for algorithm is simply recipe. It's just a procedure to accomplish a task. And so you see recipes can produce human beings, they can produce meals, they can produce baskets, and so on and so forth. Maybe all of the objects around us are infused with algorithms, as are we. And of course, algorithm infuse also popular culture. The latest from last week is the Mobilegeddon, the news that Google is introducing a new search algorithm that will be particularly targeted for mobile phones, and that will then change the way people have a search pop up on their phone as opposed to on their desktop or other devices. I mean, already we are really immersed in the filter bubble, which Eli Pariser talked about, which is the systematic personalization of search engines in which an algorithmic search selects what information a user should see. So it's almost deterministic. And the filter bubble will be heightened by this idea of optimizing the content for mobile devices. It's really, of course, as you can imagine, worrisome. I think that Eli Pariser, maybe not Pariser himself, but somebody was talking about the Nepalese earthquake. Can you imagine if you are an aid worker and you need to find something on your phone, and your phone, something important and relevant to what you're immersed in, and the search gives you other kind of data that are dictated by the format of what you're using as opposed to the objective kind of search data that you input. And you know, Eli Pariser was talking about the negative implications for civic discourse, and he was using a lot the example of entering BP, and one person enters BP and gets British Petroleum, and another person instead gets Deepwater Horizon. So it's really interesting because the determinism is one of the topics that have made algorithm kind of this mysterious and sometimes malicious object or concept in many people's minds. Not to mention the price-fixing cartel. You know, Kevin Slavin in his TED Talk used a lot the example of that book that because of a twisted algorithm and the competitive bidding between different sellers went up to $23 million. It's out of print, but it's definitely not the first Gutenberg Bible. And even the first Gutenberg Bible I didn't think costed that much. But it's because that's what happens when algorithms go awry. Not to mention Uber and the fact that there might be price-fixing cartels, according to some economists. You know that during the Sydney hostage crisis, the surge price of Uber really outraged so many people because it went up tremendously. And not to mention Jessica Seinfeld. I mean, she really has a grasp of popular culture, because when she took her kids to a bar mitzvah during a storm, she had to pay $415. And what does Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, say? He blames it on the algorithm. He says it's not us, it's the algorithm, it's the market that determines the price. So it's very interesting because sometimes algorithms have become a way to abdicate responsibility or to pretend to have a more objective, less prejudiced view of reality. There's a company called JobAlign that analyzes voices of possible employees to see whether they will be compatible, they will be acceptable, they will be amenable to other human beings. There are other algorithms that determine flight risks when new employees are interviewed. And you know, they are almost like invisible judges that decide our fates, according to these companies. And they come to mimic a little bit what happens on TV, with the difference that CeeLo and Christina Aguilera and all the other judges of The Voice tend to be more unpredictable and therefore sometimes more fair towards other human beings than algorithms might be. But that's something that we'll discuss a lot with our speakers. It's very interesting. What's better, human prejudice or algorithm cruelty? You know, so it's something that is really interesting. Another very, very often mentioned issue with algorithm is super fast trading. You know, super fast trading has become really incredibly outrageous. You know, it went from being a stock exchange in which people like lifted their cards to people being in front, traders being in front of computers, and now traders design algorithms. So there's all of these, you know, in your talk again, Kevin, you were talking about being next to a Hungarian physicist, I think it was, that was going to work on Wall Street. So it's become really an amazing way to change trade and to even create new geographies depending on where the signals and the computers are located. And of course, you might have heard this week that the British trader Navinder Sarao has been charged with instigating the flash crash of 2010. They found him at last. And he was actually playing with this algorithm, trying to sell something to then rebuy it. But the algorithm went awry. And for 5 years, nobody knew what really had happened, but so many gazillions had been lost. And it was because of this one trader that had input the wrong algorithm or given it the wrong start. So it really is about thinking of speed limit, speed of light, Wall Street, that's quite a nice slide, thinking of what happens when we let everything be faster than we can control. There are, of course, also many, many super positive applications of algorithms. This is, for instance, an application in the diagnosis, in the early diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, using the way people tap on keyboards. I mean, traditionally, it's MRIs. It's a set of diagnostic tests that take a long time before they get to a diagnosis. And instead, by using algorithms to measure the way people actually type, there's a way to detect early enough what's going on, and so on and so forth. There are many different applications, not to mention what's going on in design. You know, tonight we could talk about the algorithm in theory till kingdom comes, but what's interesting about these salons is that we can connect it to at least one field in particular, which is the field of art and design. And through that lens and the lens of the museum, we might get to deeper understanding of the reality outside, or at least that's how we like to try this experiment. This is a slide, a picture of the installation that is upstairs right now on the 3rd floor in the Contemporary Design Galleries. And it's our collection. And you see here some great examples of computational algorithm-infused design. On the left-hand side is the work of Neri Oxman. She is at the MIT Media Lab. And for many years, she's been working on extracting algorithms from natural behaviors or organic behaviors, trying to kind of understand the patterns in certain natural, you know, at the beginning she was looking at barks of trees and butterfly wings, and now she's gone into more complex organs, and you see it on the left-hand side. And then she works with really sophisticated 3D printing companies to print all that with different densities and different materials. And then on the right-hand side, upper over there, is the work of Eric Demain in collaboration with his father, Martin. And actually, Eric is here tonight, which I'm really happy to say. It's computational origami. So it's a way to really go beyond the normal folds by getting into much more complex shapes that are dictated by also algorithms. And we see here some work that we've been thinking of acquiring that shows how algorithm is a thing of today and a thing of yesteryear. This is the work of Ben Aranda and Chris Lash, that are two architects that wrote several years ago a really seminal pamphlet called Tooling for Princeton Architectural Press that talked about parametric architecture and algorithmic architecture and set some basic parameters and also some ways to proceed. And in this case, they had done this wonderful work with a Native American basket weaver, Terrell Drew Johnson. They basically had told this basket weaver that didn't know anything about mathematics but knew everything about weaving and about this kind of pattern making by hand. They acted for him. They spoke oral tradition. They told him the algorithms, and Terrell Drew Johnson made these gorgeous baskets that in a way link the past and the future and show how algorithms truly are procedure that can be made into mathematics but can also be narrated the old-fashioned way. Fashion is also becoming computational, and with very interesting results. Of course, we can go back to pre-computer algorithmic fashion. You can think of the pleats, please, by Issey Miyake. That's an example, but there are so many also if you go back in history. But this work is done with 3D printing. It usually is Iris van Herpen, who's this really amazing and really original and creative Dutch fashion designer that collaborates. She's also a great collaborator, and in this case, she collaborated once again with Neri Oxman up on top. And they try to do 3D printed dresses that are not yet completely comfortable, but definitely, you know what, it's like, you know, comfort is not everything, my dear ones, you know. So, but they're really opening up a very bright future for fashion, not to mention the kinematic system by Nervous System. Nervous System, they're two, Jessica and Jessie, and they're based up in Cambridge, and they, you might know them for their jewelry. They've been working with 3D printing in a commercial fashion for a long time, but their research is breathtaking, and this is something that also is on display here at MoMA. It's a 4D printed dress. Not only is it customized, you can customize it with the software to fit your body and also for different kind of draping effects, but also it is printed folded. So 3D printing, as you might know, costs more the bigger the volume of the object you want to print. But if you can fold it and just make it fit into a smaller vat, you can print it for less. So the algorithm not only drapes the dress the way you want, but also folds it and calculates how you print it with the folded parts. So it really is quite amazing, and it's all based on studying this process beforehand in order to give it the right instructions. Computational architecture, weaving, tooling, tiling, it's all these like ancient methodologies that are transformed and translated into computer language so that they can be replicated by machines. The Institute for Computational Design, et cetera, in Stuttgart, every year produces these amazing pavilions that are machine-made. And in this case, you see, it was all done inspired by the Cetonia. I mean, Cetonia dorata, I don't know really how to say it in English. I say it in Italian, but it's inspired by the way the Cetonia, that insect, makes its nests. And you see here how gorgeous it is, and this is the pavilion in its natural habitat. And you know, from this moment on, there's only the imagination and the machines that are the limit. But there are so many architects and designers that are working using these technologies and creating objects and environments that are everything but cold and machine-made and mathematical. I mean, the idea of thinking of cold as mathematical and mathematical as cold is something we can discuss afterwards. But they are really incredibly attuned to centuries and millennia of making. And now we go into art. You know, algorists, they used to be called. Verosco, one of the artists, used to call them algorists. I found out that algorithm used to be algorithm, and for some reason it became algorithm in the course of the 20th century, and we were discussing it before. Maybe it's because people wanted the rhythm, but and it's not even spelled the right way. But they used to be called algorists, the artists that used mathematical notations and procedures. Lillian Schwartz is possibly the most famous of all, the goddess of all. She was at Bell Labs, and then she collaborated with IBM. And she was part of this really, really famous exhibition that happened here at MoMA in 1968 that was called The Machine as Seen at the End of the Mechanical Age. She produced in that case this Proxima Centauri lamp that was almost like a lava lamp. It had this membrane that became big, small, and that was used just a few months later in Star Trek, the television series, to actually to mimic Dr. Spock's brain, you know, and how it grew and became smaller. So there was a beautiful linkage. You know, Bell Labs, if you haven't read articles and books about it, it's so fascinating the way innovation happened there. And it happened very often by having people that worked on many different topics and research at the same time coming together, offices never being closed. You know, the architecture dictated a lot of this serendipity. Other algorists, you know, Manfred Mohr, I'm just showing you a few of them. Manfred Mohr went from being an abstract expressionist using paint to launch himself into this kind of algorithmic art, computer-generated algorithm. And you see here, these artists are truly exploring the mathematical medium. And it's interesting because you'll see a change happening as we get closer in art to our days. And then we have here the work. Oh, can we go down with the music? Thank you. It's very loud. Even down more. It's not very meaningful music. Thank you. Roman Verosco is also the one that wrote that great essay that I forwarded to you, really long, that really goes into in real detail about the history of the algorithm. And what he did is he was using plotters, you know, the plotters that were normally used to print out architectural drawings, but he adapted for them Japanese brushes. So all of a sudden you have this mixture of the Japanese brush and the machine-generated drawing. So it's really quite amazing to see. It's really interesting to see what happens when algorithms clash. And this is the work of Clement Valla. He created a whole archive of mishaps in Google Earth. There's screenshots where two competing visual inputs, the 3D model of the surface of the Earth that Google Earth uses and the mapping of the aerial photography collide. So the shadows and the depth of fields from above collide with the data coming from the model. And he collected a lot of these in a very interesting way. So it is an archive of algorithms in conflict. And it's almost like accidental art, but definitely worth considering, because it relates to this idea of the reading of the earth by the algorithm. The work of Zach Blass is very different. It's about reading, it's about the topography of our faces, and in particular it becomes very political. That's what I find interesting. At the beginning, many algorists, many artists were exploring the medium of the mathematical procedure, and instead now many artists are exploring the political implications, the consequences, and also the emotional and human charge of the algorithm. Zach Blass has created this whole facial weaponization suite to create a series of masks that make our faces completely unreadable. And in particular, he's also worked on different masks. You see the black one over there is called Fag Face Mask, and it's generated from the biometric facial data of many queer men's faces as a response to scientific studies that link determining sexual orientation through rapid facial recognition techniques. So the whole idea that algorithms and computers can be used to control us, can be used to control our choices in our life, and also to profile us. So it becomes really a weapon in the hands of artists when they want to be incisive and to map what the future could be. The emotional content and the emotional power of algorithms becomes apparent in a very evident way in the algorithm that was devised by Jake Barton and Jer Thorpe for the 9/11 memorial. I'm sure you've heard about it. It was Michael Arad's fountains and all the names of the people that died. The idea was not to make them in alphabetical order because it wouldn't make sense in this case, but also lots of letters and messages were coming in from people, from relatives, asking that one name be close to the other because they were friends at work, because they used to eat together, for different very, very deeply human reasons. And Jer and Jake found a way to respect these requests of adjacencies and still give a sense of complete, how can I say, disorder, or at least, make it, what's the name of it? Casual kind of relationship in the disposition of all the names. So it's at the same time respectful of the lives that were, and also creating a sense of non-hierarchy. It's a beautiful way to think about it. Algorithms are becoming more and more a tool for artists to explore sentiments and emotions. This work by Suresh Srinivasan, Beyond Blood, is from the Royal College of Art. It's his attempt to create an algorithm to make wills, to leave objects to people based not simply on the calculation that a weak human being might make, but also their need, their desire, their predispositions. So maybe instead of leaving your castle to your children, you might want to leave it to your gatekeeper, to the person that kept it for so many years. That's the most simple way to read it. And actually, he adapted that to The Aviator, the life of Howard Hughes, and kind of scanned. There's a beautiful video on Beyond Blood, it's called, in which he scans every single object, and then he decides what the object what should happen to the object after Howard Hughes' death based on this algorithm. It's quite interesting also the fact that his research is based on Bruce Sterling's book Shaping Things, where Bruce talks about spine. It's almost like a prediction of the Internet of Things. He talks about the fact that every object can be read and linked by a computer into an archive that then decides where the objects will go. I don't like this. I'm going to just move on. Algorithms also, to decide what people like, do not exist only in music, in marketing, in advertising. They also exist in art. This is a famous work by Comar and Melamid. I used to love this. It's the most wanted painting on earth. They basically went around and asked all the different nations what they liked. Like, do you like naked pictures or not? And in particular, the United States, you see, they're very prude. So from what you've seen, would you say that you prefer paintings in which the persons are nude, partially clothed, or fully clothed? And you see, US, they want everybody fully clothed. And instead, Russia, they're okay. We compared Russia and the US because we thought it was really a good juxtaposition, and also because Komar and Melamed were Russians. So you see, by doing all this kind of report and survey, they came out with the most wanted paintings for all the countries and with the least wanted paintings for all the countries. And there's a big variety. Usually, you know, like what Scandinavia likes, the US don't, etc. And instead, look at what happens with the US and Russia. They basically, the most wanted painting is almost alike, and the least wanted painting is also almost alike. So it's really very funny. And we love to show this because it's a sort of algorithm, and also it links very well to this much more recent work by Jonas Lund, which is the Fear of Missing Out exhibition. You know, FOMO is about being late, missing out what really is cool, just being a little late for the right thing. And he decides to build these algorithms to make works of art that are just perfect for what people want, just a second ahead. So by putting together all these like favorite works that people really enjoy, he comes up with these works of art that are completely dictated and designed by algorithm. Okay, so the ping pong table behind round reflective glass that's called Black Sunday Satyr is probably coming from Jeff Koons, you know, or from some other background idea. So everything is completely generated by the computer and by an algorithm that's been completely written by Jonas Lund himself. And he says that in the fear of missing out, important categories from the art world, such as authenticity, artistry, talent, and creativity, are questioned. No kidding. It's all done by the computer. In a way, it's like Komar and Melamed years ago. Well, going back to the algorithm as an object, as you might have heard, Artsy had an auction of algorithms that were collected over several years by Ruse Laboratories. Actually, is any of you here? I thought you were coming. They were just put for auction a few weeks ago. And frankly, I should have known better how they did. But it's interesting that they were used as conceptual art. You know, basically, the algorithm stands in for a work of art. So what's a museum to do? And that's what museums try to figure out all the time. You know, I see that there's Ben Fino-Radin here, who's one of our great digital conservators, and we can talk about it with him later. But we've been collecting data and therefore also algorithms for a while. And it's something that we might have to do even more in the future. We like really this quote from Mark Napier that's about preserving the immaterial. The computer language, operating system, and hardware form an infrastructure that supports the artwork, but they are not the artwork. The work is an algorithm, a design built on this infrastructure, which is constantly changing and rapidly aging. It's alive. That's what we like to think of algorithm and much digital art or design as alive. And you need to keep it with a lot of TLC. To hold on to that technology is to tie us to a sinking ship. We have to be nimble enough to jump to the next boat, and our artwork has to be adaptable enough to do that gracefully. It's very interesting, and this is a blog post that Ben Fino-Radin published about a week ago on the MoMA blog that talks about MoMA's digital vault, and that shows how these objects that are alive are kept so that the ship doesn't sink. To talk about all this tonight and more, we have four great, great, great individuals. We're going to start with Claudia Perlich up top left. Claudia is a computer scientist by training, and she is a teacher right now, a professor, and also she is the chief scientist at Distillery, which is an advertising platform. She's truly an expert in adapting algorithm for real-world issues, and she will talk about that tonight. Going in clockward direction, we have Heather Dewey-Hagborg, who is a transdisciplinary artist and educator. She's now based in Chicago. She teaches at the Art Institute of Chicago. I saw her work the first time in Dublin at the Science Gallery. It's quite amazing. She picked up cigarette butts from the street and reconstructed faces of human beings based on the DNA that she found. A wonderful idea and a wonderful artwork that was recently copied by Ogilvy for a litter bug shaming campaign in Hong Kong. And I don't know if you saw the Twitter campaign that campaign for the appropriation of the work of an artist. But she keeps on doing more and more interesting work, merging emerging science and art. Then we get to Adam Bly. What can I say Adam Bly, about Adam? He's my best friend, and he's a great scientist that turned communicator about science. And right now, he has a company called Seed Media that before was a magazine. We worked together really, really tightly on the Design and the Elastic Mind exhibition about design and science. And right now, Adam does many different things, and amongst them, really complex algorithms for many different companies. And last but not least is Hugo Leo, who is a consumer taste researcher and data scientist. And he's a partner at a company that I love, whose name I love, that's called Hedonometrics. It says everything. It's about measuring pleasure, I guess. And he was before at eBay and in many different companies. And I think that truly it's about algorithm and taste that we'll hear from him tonight speaking. So I welcome you all, and we're going to start with Adam Bly. Adam, please come. Thank you.